So this video is probably going to be cut up many different times, but this is a good starting place video. So at this point in time, my fuel rail is out. I actually went ahead and disconnected it. It's real easy. If you just push down on these little black clips, it'll pop these off. Real easy. Careful with your injector tips. If you're running green tips, you don't want to break that little brittle piece of plastic off. Mine are upgraded, so they're shielded. Make sure all of your intake is, of course, closed off. Some blue tape is probably what I'm going to end up doing. I'm going to take these rags out and do blue tape, just so I have not stuff in my way, and it looks a little aesthetically better. Couple little things that got to be done before you get here that I already did for the M62 kit. Things like deleting the throttle cooling and looping it back into itself off of your throttle. So I've completely deleted those two openings. You can see them there if it'll focus. There we go. I deleted both of those barbs for extra space on my M62 kit. I'm going to need to extend this throttle cable to be able to bring the throttle up to this position. We have things like this is the throttle plug-in. I have my internal temperature sensor up here. I also have a couple things moved out of the way that you're going to need to get back to. Idle air control sensor is up in here somewhere as well. Took my electric fan off, so I have full room to the front. Took all my old piping off. Thankfully, this setup for here and for what I had coming across for my M62 is going to work for this manifold setup. So I left all my intercooler and everything there. After that, we're eventually going to have to remove the power steering pulley, I believe, so that we can get the bracket over it. And then we will get our initial mounting bracket here. The flat bracket goes there. And eventually our piping is going to go down here and under the alternator, or out this area here along this rail probably, so that I can go directly to the intercooler. So I need to get from essentially here along here to this pipe, and then I can hit the intercooler, come back up, and come in the front of the intake. Idle air control is removed. It's down here somewhere. Yep. Idle air control is removed. And we'll put it back in on a different loop probably, but that's the old loop. Also, my whole catch can is removed right now. It would normally be attached here and back down. This is my return line for my catch can currently, which goes to the split on my dipstick as a return from my catch can. When I want to dump my catch can, I can either change it out the hard way. I have a valve on the bottom of my catch can that I've installed. You can see here. So if and when I want to dump my catch can, I can just dump it straight into my oil and then change my oil. Or if I'd like, especially once I go E85, I can just disconnect this line, flip the switch, drain my catch can into something else, re-hook up the line, and then just make sure I watch my oil levels and I don't go low. That's the start of the build. Hopefully we'll get the all the bracketry and the intake installed soon. I need to tap the bottom of the intake for a larger MPT port for my temperature sensor that this VIMS is using. So other than that, as soon as I can get that port tapped and larger and threaded correctly, then I will go ahead and do the install of the intake manifold. All right, just a quick overview of what the bracket should look like before it goes on to your car. This should be correct. I hope I've got it right. I haven't actually mounted it yet, so hopefully I don't have to reshoot this video. But essentially, when you start out, this is what your mounting plate's going to look like in the upright position. Right, where you've got the little notch cut out on the left. This is where your tensioner pulley is going to be. This is where your idler is going to end up. So you've got this bolt and this bolt. These are both threaded back here. They're the only two threaded pieces. So that one's threaded, and this one down here is threaded as well. So what we have is we have the top alternator bolt running to a washer, running to a pulley, and on the back of the pulley you'll have three spacers that are the same size. The paperwork says that they're 14 millimeter, I measured them in at 16 or 15. That might be the powder coat thickness or something along those lines, but they are all the same size. There is one that is slightly thicker, and that is the one that's going to go on the back side. So this one's listed as 17.5 millimeters, and it is 17.5 millimeters. So up top, this is your top radiator bolt. This is the one that has the Allen wrench, and it has threading all the way through. So this is going to thread all the way through your top alternator bolt. You've got a spacer behind the pulley and a washer in front. Then you've got this bolt, and this will become your new rear alternator bolt. Before you tighten any of that down, you need to make sure you have your top bolts in. These are all the 6x25 bolts. Or no, actually, sorry, excuse me. No, I'm wrong. These were 8x15s with matching nuts. So you've got nut, washer, washer, nut on all three of these top ones. And then the reason why they say not to tighten these up, or not to put these on yet, is so that you can tighten these up eventually. Those three bolts are going to go through these three slots. That's the charge pan. So it's upside down currently. It will eventually look like this. Excuse the mess in the background. Eventually this will go to there, and those bolts will connect these plates together, and that'll be your whole mounting plate for your supercharger. The bottom bolt is the bolt that does not have threading, that is longer. It's the longest bolt you have. Bolt, washer, largest spacer, washer and nut. Okay? So again, this is what we should look like when we're mounted up. Once this is all mounted correctly, you can put these bolts and the plate on, mount it to its two vertical mounting brackets as well. This vertical mounting bracket is going to attach and sit. I'm guessing it's sitting down like this so that it fits in there. This is going to sit off the top of your motor mount, and then will eventually tie into, I believe, this hole right here will be the hole that it goes down through and attaches to there. This one attaches to the block of your motor, and then the other screw, I believe, is going to be this mounting screw back here. It's going to be non-threaded because all these threaded ones are for the supercharger. So all of these ones that are here, 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 and here are all threaded. Those are what's going to actually attach your supercharger down to the plate. Okay, so one of the final items you have to do before you attach the supercharger to the discharge plate is to go ahead and scuff up the surface, so that way your gasket has a little bit of bite. So what you want to do is lay your gasket down, kind of softly mark it out. I'm just going to mark it with a felt tip pen, and then you want to take your Dremel, which I'm going to use with just a little scuff pad, and I'm basically just going to scuff everywhere where that's going to sit. That way you get good bite on your gasket. And that's what's going to look like when you're done. Nothing crazy. I'm not trying to actually like peel off the powder coat. You can see, you know, we got a little places here, but you don't want to feel any crazy divots or lines. This all has to be airproof. So I just used it enough just to scuff the powder coat. You can see a couple places, you know, you can see the silver, but you can't even, I can feel nothing with this. I can't feel it. You don't want any major scratches. Don't do this with anything crazy sandpaper. I just used a real quick soft Dremel buffing bit, and that should be good. All right, to attach the supercharger to the discharge plate, you're going to use the 8x45. Make sure you put the washer on before you put the bolt down. Okay, after you've mounted it to the discharge plate, all your screws are on, you can move to your intake. And same thing, I'm going to scuff up that before I made it down. This should be using 4 of the 8115s. Alright, so I had to prop this up kind of funny because it still has all the discharge plate and my, what's going to end up being my under connector. In the end, I used a 2 3/4 connector to step down to a 2 1/2 connector, and then 2.5 aluminum all the way through. You can see the discharge pan and all the bolts are in. This is what the intake's going to come off looking like. The whole back of it. There's going to normally be this regulator is going to go here. This is a 6-pound regulator that's going to fire this off and keep it at 6 pounds. You can trick this. Or if you have the certain type of brake reservoir for your brake fluid, then you're going to need to use the 6x30 brackets to relocate that and push that bracket out farther. But you can see, you know, in the end, this is going to be sitting flat, obviously. There she is. All right. Take 4. All right, guys, taking off from the last video, you should have deleted everything that you need to take off. If you haven't, stop, go back, watch the other videos that I did for the M62. That'll get you prepped to get here, how to delete your throttle, how to delete your ABS, how to relocate your throttle, all of that stuff. So you'll see here, we're at our alternator. Get some gloves on here. And from the last video I showed you, here's the prep of our bracket. These 3 are going to be on top and basically going to sit just like this. Sorry, I hit the camera. So ideally, top alternator bolt, bottom alternator bolt, bracket on this side. So we're going to go ahead and try to accomplish that right now. I currently have my top alternator bolt in and my bottom alternator bolt out because I had to get my old brackets off. So I'll set this aside. Go ahead and unthread this guy. And I'm pretty sure my alternator is going to stay perched for me. Well, maybe not. Okay. So, take the nuts off of these. Sorry guys, real time. Okay. Hopefully, now I did have problems with my all aluminum radiator previously, where it was hard for me to get this bottom bolt in because it doesn't want to clear my housing. But it looks like I'm going to get there this time. Okay. Reseat the top. Get a bolt started here. Should be able to get around our alternator. There we go. Now, just looking to get my top bolt here started and going through there. Bottom bolt. I feel as though I may have these reversed. Let's check that. The top bolt's there. Just got to get it started. Caught up here on something. I'm not sure what it is. I think the actual bolt might be stuck in the powder coating. There we go. Boy, didn't expect to have this much difficulty, truthfully. I almost want to see if I can get the bottom started. I can get a little bit more light down there. Ah. So we are nowhere near the bottom at the moment. We lost it at some point. There we go. There we go. So, got my bottom bolt started. That should make it a lot easier to pivot in place. This feels like it's locking up on something. I don't know what or why. I can't get it to spin very freely. There we go. Might be locking up on that powder coat. Okay. Now we're moving. You'll see I'm starting to push through here. Let me get that wire out the way. Okay. Get our light restrung. Okay. Feeling better now. So we got our top started. My pulley's being a little bit of a bugger. And again, this top bolt just doesn't seem like it wants to move through all that comfortably. There we go. Okay, that one's through. And it looks like we can start our bottom one as well. And then I want to get them just started on a thread, but you don't want to tighten these down because you won't be able to get to these with your Allen wrench to tighten them up when the time comes and you have to mount your vertical bracket. So that's what it's going to look like once you get your bracket on there. I will tighten down these pulleys in a little bit, but essentially when I'm finished and everything's tightened up, this is what we're going to look like. Bracket's nice and straight, spacers are on the bottom, pulley for the alternator spins freely, it's not touching anything. Currently I have the other belt tensioner at full tension. That's what my Allen wrench here is holding. Now we'll be able to take our plate and we'll be able to put our plate right here. Let me go grab that and cut back to this. Okay, so now that you got your top and bottom alternator bolts started, you don't even have to start them really, you can just get them cradled up so you know that you're in the right position. Now we can move on to the next step, which is you need these two mounting brackets. So you're gonna have the Z-shaped bracket and you're gonna have this small guy. The little guy is gonna strap to your block. I'm thinking probably on that nut right there, that's that bracket that holds all your loom and everything together. So I'm guessing it goes off of that bolt and then to the bottom of the discharge pan. Discharge pan is actually upside down right now. And then you have this big Z-shaped bracket. That is going to come off of your motor mount right there. And so you'll have one end on your motor mount. I believe this angled one is probably going to fit right down in there. Real nice, like, you know, look at that. Like Keith knows what the fuck he's doing, right? Engineering all nicely. So you have a cut end that goes down there. Top end is going to bolt to the bottom of the discharge pan. Then we have the discharge pan. It is going to sit in this orientation like this. So there's 3 screws down here, threaded holes. Those are going to go to those 3 bolts. I had those nuts. These nuts are on here strictly just to hold these in place. I'm going to take those nuts off and then screw it into the plate. But for now, it's nice to be able to set this up. So essentially, when we're ready, that's about how the discharge pan is going to sit. You'll connect your two brackets, and the one bracket should go through this hole here. So you'll see that all these holes along the edges, these are all threaded. Those are for the So all of these ones that are threaded, those are going to go for the supercharger. You'll notice that there is a hole here and a hole out here. Those are not threaded. That is going to be for your two brackets. The one coming up from the motor mount and the one coming off from the side of the engine. You may need to space these out. You may need to add a washer or slightly, bend it just a little bit, depending on what engine and which configuration you have. Some of these are a little different on the inside. So now you can begin to determine what your piping is going to look like underneath, because you have to get from that downspout up through here, along the side of your alternator. This will come out of the way, so we have plenty of room through here, and then that will connect it to, this is where my intake is. Some people are going to go ahead and run straight down and hit their intake down there. I think I can do just fine by going from here to there. We'll see. I may end up chopping that pipe down and going under the bottom like the kit suggests. But I already have my intercooler and everything piped, so I'd like to try to join up to this. I'll probably just do a 90-degree from here, and then a 45 or something back, and another 90 from the bottom of the discharge pan, straight down there, 90 out. All right, this is what we're looking to accomplish after you've got your bottom alternator bolt on. You won't really be able to see it. It's down there in the middle right there. I had to throw an extra washer on mine just because it wasn't tightening down as much as I'd like before the bottom bolt buried down, but I've got a weird alternator. It did this to me with my other kit too. Didn't seem to be as long as it should be, but either way, just an extra washer in there to be sure. The bottom tensioner is on right here. No big deal. You can tighten it up. I have removed the top tensioner from here just so that you can get access to this bolt, and I also have my top top alternator bolt here is not tightened down, so I can move this out if I need to, because you're going to need access to this bolt here. Once you put the discharge pan down, those three bolts connect to it. And yeah, make sure you have your brackets set up. You have that back bracket set up, and you have that bracket, the vertical bracket right here. Make sure it's tightened up and ready to go, because once you put the discharge pan, you're only going to have a very, very small area to reach underneath there. So make sure all your silicone and your fittings are tightened up, because to get this off, you got to get the whole discharge pan off if you want to access anything else down here. So make sure you're wrapped up. Make sure all your deletes are done. Once you put the intake on and the discharge with the supercharger on it, it's going to be very hard to access all of this stuff. All right. Now that you've got your discharge pan roughly in place and on, I've got the two front corners started. I just started the threads just to make sure I was good and in place and squared up on the front plate. Back here, you have the 8x25 that goes down to the vertical bracket. I had to pull on a little bit of bracket. I had to pull on the bracket a little bit depending on how you tightened it down, but it went in pretty easily. That bracket was a little bit more difficult. I didn't use any of the spacers or anything like that, and I haven't tightened it all the way down to the block yet, but I figured it'll be just fine once I get some nuts on it. All right, once you have your supercharger in place, you can go ahead and put all your bolts down and through, and begin to tighten up your front plate bolts. I got to pull this pulley off a little further and loosen it up so I can get access to that nut, and then I'll tighten down the top pulley and the middle nut. Couple issues that I'm running into with an E36 vert. First thing is that bolt down there on the front corner of the supercharger. I believe the only way that I'm going to get to that is by moving my oil filter. I have thought about doing an oil filter replacement and moving it, but yeah, so I think the other choice would be to attach the supercharger to the discharge plate and put it all in as one. I might end up doing that. I might end up taking the discharge plate off and seeing if I can finagle it out of place to get that one bolt in the front corner there. The other issue that I'm running into that I knew that I might run into is the brake fluid reservoir. There are some low profile versions of these that work a lot better. I think you might be able to rotate these. I believe I'm going to go ahead and do the Chase Bay Boosterless Elite anyways. It was kind of on my list, so now I'll probably do that before I can finish the Supercharger project. I'll look and talk with Keith. Maybe there's a solution to be able to rotate that 90 degrees on the back wall or something along those lines. But yeah, here we are. Supercharger's on. Looks nice. Once I get that Hyde Motor Works intake on there too, it's going to look real nice. Alright, we're going to go over the intake a little bit. I've modified mine, so obviously I've pulled my old O-rings out. I coated them in Vaseline to make them, you know, feel a little better, refresh them up a little bit. Not coated, but just wiped them in Vaseline a little bit so they stick, so they're not drying out, and that way we can get these going. Now, I have a larger temperature sensor for mine, so I actually had to tap there's 4 holes here. 3 of them are the same size, 1/4 inch NPT. One of them is actually, sorry, they might be just 1/8 inch NPT, and then this was a 1/4. I apologize, I'm probably not correct on that. But either way, you have 3 the same size. These 3 are all the same size, slightly smaller. Then you have one that's larger. That one, you know, whatever you want to do with it, I decided to make it my internal temperature sensor. However, my internal temperature sensor is larger than what was there. So I had to tap it out. I just went and got a 3/8. Let's see if I can find it here. Oh, it's there. You just can't see it. It's right there. So it's a 3/8 NPT. Again, it's right there. You just, oh, maybe a little bit. There we go. 3/8 NPT. And I just tapped it. A little bit of cutting oil by hand. I used a crescent wrench. I didn't even have one of those nice handy dandy little spinny things that you can get. Couldn't find mine. So I tapped it with a crescent wrench. Came out just fine. It's just aluminum. It's no problem. It's all threaded now. Make sure you clean out your intake after you do something like that. You don't want any metal shards or anything inside there. I still have to clean mine out a little better. And then obviously I've attached the end plate using the screws that they gave me, and there is a gasket in there as well. So you have these, I believe these were 6x25, 4 of them. They're threaded. Screw them down. You can see I still have some metal down in there. I'm going to clean this whole thing out real good before I, essentially I'm going to hot tank it, take it apart, I'm going to take this off and clean all out in there. I've still got some small metal threads down there from when I drilled and tapped it, but I'll clean this out completely. Moreover, so what we have here is we have our internal air temperature, and then I plugged a bung. I will probably use these at some point. I'm not sure yet how I'm going to route, whether it's going to be, you know, I think the brake booster comes off the supercharger now. Idle air control also goes to the supercharger, I believe. I have to get the supercharger yet to figure all of that out, but for the meantime, I tapped in a standard NPT nipple. This will be my boost reference, and also my reference for my VEMS to record and determine so between this and the internal air temperature, it will determine my lambda, and it'll work from there. So that's done. The bracket's all set up. The discharge pan is getting ready to go. I should have a workable install on the bracket coming soon. Well, it's super late at night, but we've arrived. We're going to call this definitely the final setup. Starts and runs. Idles at about 800 now. Got to work with the tuner. I am going to get a custom throttle cable made. We'll go over that a little bit. But for the final setup, this is what we have come to. So obviously we have the Hyde Motor Works all aluminum intake. Underneath the intake, I have installed 2 small nipples in the back. One is direct to my ECU and my boost controller for my boost gauge, and also my map sensor for my ECU. The second nipple runs to the regulator on the back of the supercharger. Does it get out of my own shadow? So that triggers at 6 pounds and gates it at 6 pounds. I also have one of the ports just plugged with a brass plug. The closest one here, which is bringing temperature gauge from, closest from the intake from the charge, is going to be my temperature sensor. That also is running on a harness, an extended harness, and goes to my ECU. We then start here, obviously, with the intake. I ended up using a K&N stacked filter. It was blue, and I like the fact that it's a stacked filter, which means it's open here too. So we've got a little more extra air breathability. When my custom throttle arrived, originally this sensor was pointed the other way. And you may even see in one of the other videos that it is pointed the other way and it's tucked up pretty hard against the supercharger. I didn't like that. It is a pretty easy job to go ahead and remove these two screws here. And then there's a locking collar. You can see it here. Flip the throttle 180, move the D-collar, set these two screws, the one here and the one on the other side, set those in place, and then you can actually I was able to tighten that Allen wrench in place to lock the collar. This is the Hyde Motor Works custom bracket. So what we were talking about with the throttle, kind of have a hodgepodge here at the moment, but it works. I don't like that it's scratching right here. So I'm going to remedy this as soon as possible. You can also see it's not exactly in line the way I'd like it to be. What I did is I had the original throttle cable. I used it because it has a nice stopper that attaches to the firewall, and it's got a hook on the end that attaches to the pedal. So that was all kind of nice. So I kept that, but I did chop it in the end. I cut off the bent piece off of here on the end of this and just left it straight so I can use this as an adjuster. Right now it's just kind of acting as a spacer to keep me off of the well. And then I got a bicycle brake cable that has a nub on the end of it that I can tuck into the side of the throttle down here. Comes in here, sticks around, goes around. And then I just joined them together with these nice little clevises. You can get them at your Ace Hardware or whatever. They're just a wire joiner. So for now, that works. It gives me an operational throttle. I'm going to take it apart, and then I'll know exactly how long of a throttle I need. And I believe Pegasus Auto makes a custom throttle cable, a nice steel braided cable. I looked at a couple, so I'll probably get a custom cable made in the end. That was the only thing I didn't love on all of this, of how I made it work. But we just made it work tonight. It doesn't have to work very long. Moving along, obviously we have our Mishimoto radiator here, and we have our fan powered down there, 10-inch, all wired in over to our Highness, running to a power and in the box. Catch can is coming out of here, running back around. Loops up. I have my add one catch can. The bottom of the catch can is running to the down to the motor. The dipstick, sorry. Bottom of the catch can runs to the dipstick for an easy dip if I want to just drop it or drain it. I'll have a little valve right there that I can do. And right now I'm venting to atmosphere. I want to eventually maybe loop this back into the intake. Haven't got that far yet. I have the brake booster from Chase Bay's Delete installed. I feel like I might still have a bubble in there, but I'll deal with that later once I actually get it to drive. I have to also adjust the bias forward or backwards. Supercharger is mounted as we explained before. Charge pan comes out the bottom down here, runs down through the horn hole. Intercooler obviously is down here, runs back across, comes around the front. You can almost see down there. Of course you can't. Yeah, you can see it coming up down there. I have it coming up there, around back into the intake. Sorry if the video is a little choppy. Like I said, it's late at night. But it starts, it runs, and the tuner's got it going. Idle was a problem. We had some vacuum leaks that we were dealing with, but we got those settled in, and now she's idling nicely at about 800. Ready to rock. We'll start building some power. I'll get her on the dyno.